GM is seemingly taking action to stop people flipping the most in-demand vehicles, ranging from the Corvette Z06 through to the Hummer EV. This of course is interesting. Normally a company wants people to crave their vehicles so much they'll pay over sticker. Normally a manufacturer would want a bubbly market. But it seems things have gotten out of hand, and GM is trying to take action. Let's start off by looking at what GM is seemingly going to do. And this is an article titled, GM Threatens Predatory Dealers with Order Cancellations and Non-Transferable Warranties, in an article by Byron Hurd. Would-be Z06, Hummer EV, and Escalade V flippers, consider yourself warned. General Motors will launch a second salvo against misbehaving dealerships next week, with a set of policies aimed at curbing predatory markup strategies. With the new Chevrolet Corvette Z06, GMC Hummer EV SUV, and Cadillac Escalade V about to head into production, GM is putting its foot down yet again. Dealers that attempt to circumvent GM's markup restrictions by dealing directly with brokers or other resellers could find themselves in a particularly nasty spot, as the company is threatening to withhold future allocations and end the transferability of warranties when dealers facilitate the reselling of vehicles within 12 months. While this may help curb some dealership chicanery, it's possible that the real loser in such a deal could end up being the customer, who unwittingly ends up with an unwarranted vehicle. We suspect GM has a counter for that, but we'll have to wait until next week to find out exactly how these new policies will be enforced. Here's the communication in its entirety. Dear GM dealership team, we are continuing to build momentum as we head into the second half of the year, and we have started shipments of several high-demand and limited production products. This letter serves as a follow-up to my communication from January this year, where we reiterated your contractual requirements and our policies on selling new vehicles for resale. When vehicles are quickly resold, particularly by unauthorized dealers or by other resellers that do not adhere to GM's standards, the customer experience suffers, and GM's brands are damaged. As a result, on certain high-demand enthusiast products, we're limiting the transferability of certain warranties and barring the seller from placing future sold orders on reservations for certain high-demand models, as identified by GM, if the vehicle is resold within the first 12 months of ownership. These changes are being implemented to ensure an exemplary customer service, to ensure our brands remain strong, and to help prioritize ownership and brand enthusiasts amongst loyal customers. These changes will not impact product recalls in any way. Currently, the products impacted by these changes include the following: 23 manufacturing year Cadillac Escalade V, Chevrolet Corvette Z06, GMC Hummer EV, SUT, and SUV. Certain warranties will not be transferable if the original owner resells the vehicle within 1 year of delivery. In the coming days, you will receive a message from your respective brands that will outline the full details of the warranties and customer acknowledgement requirements to implement this new process. Thank you in advance for continuing to do your part in ensuring our customers have great experiences when purchasing these truly special products. If you have any questions, comments, or queries, please reach out to your zone manager. The article from Autoblog then continues. While GM's hands are largely tied in the matters of the normal dealership sales practices, its franchise agreements include language that allows some flexibility in cases where the dealing is acting against the interests of GM, its brands, or its products, or is behaving in a misleading or unethical manner, as GM Vice President Steve Carlisle pointed out in a dealer communication sent in 2022. Providing customers misinformation about additional sums being necessary for a customer to keep a reservation is just one example of a tactic that reflects poorly on all of us, Carlisle said. There we go, that's what GM is aiming to do. Potentially cancel the warranties of people who flip vehicles, and also cancelling allocations for dealers that facilitate this practice, if there's evidence that the dealer is going out and trying to encourage that type of flipping arrangement. So why then is GM doing this? Well, it's likely because GM realizes that if people are having difficulty accessing vehicles and or having to pay well above sticker due to the frothiness of the aftermarket, then a couple of things happen. One, GM doesn't partake directly in that aftermarket. GM doesn't benefit directly if you sell the Hummer EV for well above sticker in the aftermarket. They don't benefit directly if you've managed to flip your Corvette Z06. Therefore, GM doesn't care that much if you've made a profit per se. Clearly, they don't want you to lose a ton of money when you go out and sell your car second hand. That would be bad. They don't want their cars to be associated with massive depreciation. But by the same token, they don't need their cars to get frothy, massive markups in the second-hand market. You add onto this the fact that GM would like loyal customers. Customer loyalty is going to be more evident if people can get a reasonable allocation within a reasonable time period, rather than those being soaked up rather, by flippers. That is, if people are going out and just entering the market for flipping and financial reasons, then it creates a bad taste in the mouth of enthusiasts, which ultimately is going to harm long-term loyalty from those enthusiasts to GM. GM is likely realizing that the frothiness in the market is short-lived. It's not going to be always the case that people can go out and flip their used car for more than they paid for it. GM realized that the writing is on the wall for that market. Therefore, they're focusing primarily on the more loyal customers, the more enthusiasts that are going to be repeat customers, are going to buy multiple vehicles from GM, and are going to keep coming back to GM for their aftermarket service. That is, GM is trying to balance the desirability of good resale with also the desirability from GM's perspective of people getting access to vehicles, so people keep coming back for more vehicles and people keep coming back to the service center to do those aftermarket services that make a lot of money for manufacturers. Having a good dealership experience helps to facilitate that. And if dealerships are going around either A, exhausting allocations by catering to flippers, and or dealerships are going out and doing massive sticker markups, i.e. massive markups to even buy a vehicle, then that creates distaste in the mouth of consumers, and they're more likely to just switch brands, and brand loyalty will go down. So we can see an inherent logic behind what GM is doing here, especially since they aren't directly benefiting from the frothy aftermarket situation. So the next question is whether this is a good or bad corporate practice. Is this ultimately going to be beneficial for GM as a manufacturer, i.e. beneficial for GM's car market broadly speaking? In broad terms, I think it is, but you need to have some restraint. GM benefits directly from there being a strong second-hand market. They don't need the second-hand market to be frothy. They don't need it to be a bubble. They don't need people to be able to flip a car for massively more than what they paid. But they do need people to not take a massive hit when they go and resell their cars. Having decent resale, so you can know you can buy a new vehicle from the retailer and then sell it without losing a ton of money, is hugely advantageous. That gives people confidence to go out and buy that car. It's much like in the Rolex market, where being able to sell your Rolex for a reasonable price in the second-hand market encourages the primary market, because it makes people more confident to go out and actually buy that watch to begin with. Same basic principle here. Furthermore, if GM is going around cancelling warranties, they need to be super cautious about the particular markets they're doing this in, because cancelling warranties won't fly in every market. In some markets, there's effectively an implicit consumer guarantee, and they won't just be able to void a warranty because they don't like to whom it is sold. For example, in the case of Australia, which admittedly is not really where they're focusing here, but they're focusing in North America, but in Australia, actions that would void a warranty are going to be quite difficult for them to really enforce, particularly if the person purchasing this vehicle wasn't otherwise aware that their warranty would be voided. So there is going to be some legal trickery that is going to be necessary for them to sort out. So ultimately, GM is heading in the right direction. One can see why this could be good from a brand management perspective, but GM does need to be super careful about this. So if I have some misgivings about voiding warranties, what alternatives might there be to potentially discourage excess frothiness in the market, which ultimately won't be sustainable long term? Because as I indicated, it's not always going to be the case where one can turn around and flip a car for more than what you paid, because supply chains will ultimately catch up, and GM doesn't want to lose that brand loyalty by the time those supply chains do in fact catch up. Well, obviously GM does need to sort out its manufacturing. That is going to be the ideal way to sort out some of the issues here, such that their supply is getting closer toward meeting demand. It doesn't necessarily have to be above demand, it just has to be around meeting demand. You don't necessarily want a supply glut, because a supply glut would undermine long-term prices for these cars, but you want a little bit more supply so we're not in this massively constrained environment that's creating those undesirable effects before. GM might also focus on limiting the number of vehicles individuals might be able to buy. For example, you might limit the number of vehicles, particularly desirable models, a certain individual could buy in each year. Alternatively, You might force that individual to hold on to their vehicle for a certain amount of time, so 12 months or however long you feel it needs to be. Maybe 6 months might be more realistic. You force them to hold it on for that time, and if they do flip their car, and you'd be able to identify this via the VIN transacting, if they do flip their car, then they automatically lose access to allocations in future deals, unless perhaps they can demonstrate a good reason for doing so or there's some appeal mechanism. Having an appeal mechanism is obviously useful, because if someone needs to sell their car for medical bills, you hardly want to really penalize them in those types of situations. But in any case, if someone needs to flip their car, then you might remove allocations from them in the next certain time period, or make it less likely they'll get access to a highly desirable car going forward. So GM might take actions along those lines. It's very difficult to take actions against dealers unless the dealers are engaging in unscrupulous activities, because the dealer won't necessarily know the intentions of that party who has bought the car to go out and sell it or not. It's akin to the approach that sometimes is taken in the handbag sector, where Chanel reportedly limits the number of bags an individual can buy in each year. Nevertheless, there are alternatives to just going out and voiding warranties that GM might want to consider. They won't necessarily tank that second-hand market, but could also avoid the problems associated with voiding a warranty. And in any case, I hope that gives you a bit of an insight about what GM is doing with trying to restrict flipping and potentially cancelling car flippers and potentially voiding warranties in vehicles that are flipped, and some of the penalties they appear to be trying to impose upon dealerships that are engaging in problematic practices. If you have any thoughts about GM's actions here, or any thoughts about what's going on in this second-hand market, do let me know that in the comments below. And otherwise, of course, it would be great if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel. And hopefully I'll see you for future videos as well.